Hello everyone, welcome to the 200th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this video, I'll be discussing AI, AGI, because it's very topical following OpenAI's 12 days of presentation of all the advances and the claim that, the O3 model is, AGI basically. What this might hold for the future, and basically look at the positives, the negatives, and looking at AI through a more spiritual lens. So first, let's look at the positive potentials for AGI or AI. The first big potential, which I've already discussed in previous videos, is the potential for a massive global coordination of humanity, facilitated massive global coordination. What that means is that if you look at the evolution of humanity's systems, whether it is the financial system, the political system, all of the different systems that we've put in place, what they have enabled ultimately is the bigger and bigger coordination or facilitated coordination of more and more humans together. That is, in order to build a Large Hadron Collider or to build a skyscraper, it requires the coordination of millions of humans, and not even of millions of humans in the same place. It requires for innovations to be, to happen all over the place, and for those innovations to circulate in order for them to cross-fertilize and to have all the engineering, all of the intellectual aspects and theoretical aspects for, having all the technology to build the skyscraper and all this stuff. And you see that across human history, like, the Roman Empire, it cannot be built from a tribe of 1,000 individuals. But in order for coordinating hundreds of thousands of people, you need to have certain systems in place. And if you look at what AI brings to the table, it is clear that today we're reaching a kind of limit as to the current systems in place for coordinating all of humanity and making sure that their actions are coherent. You look at, for instance, democracy, institutions, bureaucracy, and you have a whole movement of, shrinking the state and all that stuff because the complexity has mushroomed, but of our world and, the complexity of all the problems that we're facing, and so has the complexity of bureaucracies increased. But it is unclear whether bureaucracies are now, fit or equipped with the tools to face that complexity, or if they actually add complexity to an already complex world. But AI has the potential to ultimately simplify all of that. And so if you look at, I always give this example of direct democracy and consultations. Like you have the EU Commission launching a consultation, an open consultation on various topics. And they've launched a consultation on the digital euro, and they received hundreds of thousands of citizen contributions. As a human, how do you process all that data? And it's just impossible to have, 100 or 1,000 bureaucrats that each have to read individually 100, individual contributions from citizens, and then try to, compact that or create something coherent out of that. But AI can perfectly well process huge amounts of data and to figure out, what are the common points, what are the points of disagreement, even offer suggestions for a compromised position. All of these things are possible to AI. So you could see that AI is basically the right tool that enables for more and more for self-governance. Meaning, if you have a city, for instance, of 50,000 or 100,000 or 200,000 individuals, well, via AI tools, blockchain, and all kinds of other tools that are sort of converging here with the metaverse and all that stuff, digital twins, for instance, of the city and mapping all the city. All of these tools coming together would enable for these citizens to coordinate to transform, or deal with plenty of problems in the city, decide what to build, repair roads and all that stuff, facilitated by AI, making sure that their individual actions amount to a certain degree of coherence. So an AI can examine, for instance, the opinions of what 50,000 people want, and then issue individual recommendations for the different people for them to act on. And all of those different initiatives would amount to a global coherence that is not necessarily understandable at the human level, but that would still create coherence after the fact. Right now, we still want to be in control of everything, but an AI system, you could give it. So this brings me to the second point, this kind of homeostatic tool for the material aspect of the earth. So it's almost like AI, not only is it a tool for allowing for hundreds of thousands of people to coordinate together, and also even this idea of Benjamin Barber of overcoming the nation state model and going more local with democracy, with going back to city states, basically, where like cities of a certain population would become autonomous. And then imagine that they create a sort of a network between each other, with AI facilitating the ensuring that the different initiatives taken up by the different cities amount to coherence, a coherent kind of action. So each city would say, this is what we want to do in the future. And then an AI would check, between the coherence between all those actions. And then with a feedback loop saying, between two cities, this is not compatible because, for instance, this is a very silly example, you have chosen to standardize the railway, distance between two railway tracks at this, this distance. And the other city has decided to standardize it to this distance. It's incompatible because then the trains would not be able to circulate. Please make sure that this is, homogenized. And it could monitor all kinds of things. It could monitor for fisheries and the number of fishes that are being planned to be fished out of the sea, and see, if with the population, and monitor the population in real time of the different fishes in the sea through IoT devices, and look at what the humans are planning to fish based on all the cities, and then say, look, this is not working out, you're going to overfish or whatever. And so, not only is it a tool for massive human coordination, but also a tool for creating a sort of a homeostasis of the material aspects of the earth. So it's as if you give an AGI in charge of making sure that the entire planet becomes a homeostatic system that is balanced, and that comes back to balance with all of the research we've done on ecosystems, their interdependence, the sea, the climate, all of those things. You can give an AGI a mandate to say, your job is to ensure that the earth functions as this homeostatic material environment. And it's the same for your body, basically, but your body has this intelligence of, if you stray off of the homeostatic path, like for instance, you have a fever or you have a cough or a disease or whatever, there is this drive for your body to come back to a homeostatic state of being healthy and having a temperature of 36.5 and all kinds of different things, like the level of vitamins, minerals in your body and all that's stabilizing to a certain norm or bandwidth. Apply that same principle to the planet as a whole, with a certain number of indicators and parameters, much like when you do your blood work, and they monitor for deficiencies in certain minerals or vitamins in your body. Imagine an AGI that would be in charge of the homeostatic state of the planet, and would be able to leverage not only human actions, but also a kind of fleet of robots that it has at its disposal, that it could send or send on missions, basically, to restore the environment, or do all kinds of actions that ensure that the ecosystems are in balance, that the Earth's resources are not depleted, and all kinds of other things. Then AI and AGI has a massive potential for education and learning, like bringing every human up to speed with our collective intellectual development. That is, if you've ever tried, interacting with some of these models, they can be a perfectly tailored or custom teacher for you. And with the additional development of now these models being able to see what you're doing, with your hands, and see your face and see the objects you interact with and the environment you're in, it's really next level in terms of making sure that every human is now up to speed with the collective intellectual production that we've created as humans, and anything that you are curious about, it will explain to you in as many ways and as many times as you need to understand it. And I've used it already to understand, the philosophy of Simondon, for instance, or various philosophers and their ideas. When I read some of these passages or paragraphs in their original works that are almost impossible to understand just because of the word salad and all the concepts that they pack together. And so I just copy paste this into, AI, and it'll explain it to me in as many ways as I need to. And it will also refer me to other material and all that stuff. So in that sense, it's like the ultimate, most patient, personalized teacher. And that doesn't mean that we will no longer need the human touch. But in terms of a personal tutor to bring you up to speed if you're, if you've dropped out or you didn't understand what your math classes were about or whatever, in terms of remedial teaching, and also in terms of cultivating your curiosity outside of the school curriculum, this is perfect. Because obviously you need the human connection in terms of emotions, in terms of encouragement, even though I do believe that encouragement from AI is still useful, but nothing replaces the warmth of a human smile or an encouragement from a real human being, because ultimately we are social animals. But that is basically what teachers in the future, I believe, will focus on, is this human connection, cultivating this human connection, and then leaving it to AI to satisfy the natural desire for humans to push beyond what the teacher has explained if they're passionate about something, where the teacher cannot go into depth and doing a separate class on Egyptology or ancient Greece if you're passionate about that, while the other students are passionate about something else. They should cultivate this basically this almost like general knowledge and culture and knowledge about all kinds of different things, so that you're naturally curious, and then you can push that curiosity based on your preferences through AI and AGI. And finally, one big opportunity I see for AI and AGI, and it kind of makes me laugh a bit, is that if you look at some of the problems that we've developed, being our taxation system, our legal system, sometimes it almost looks like humanity has complexified our world on purpose, in order for some people to have, to have a competitive advantage over others. So in a way, it's very good that our taxation system is super complex, because it allows for a whole industry to be built on top of that complexity. Like, you need professional accountants that need to study for tens of years to navigate that complex system and be able to make sense of it. And then you have to pay them big money for them to do your accounting. But you see that there is a kind of an end game to that logic, is that you create laws upon layers of regulation that are more complex every time. And in the end, even humans can't keep up with the complexities that they've built for themselves in the systems that they put in place, just because they, almost as if they need to be sure that they create this pocket of a meaningful work or job for themselves, so that other humans cannot access. So, it would be terrible if the taxation system was simple, because then we wouldn't need accountants, and then accountants would be out of a job, and then, But with AI, this tendency of complexifying everything artificially, just so millions of people can keep their jobs, and because they need to train for X amount of years to be the top, a lawyer or the top accountant or the top economist, all of that falls out of the window, because these AGI and these AI systems basically are becoming better than them at understanding and navigating the complexities of the systems that humans build from themselves. So AI and AGI will result in either, and this is maybe the negative aspects, which I'll go into in a minute, but either an even bigger race for complexification, where now you have to hire these AI agents that we will be able to navigate even higher complexities of bureaucracies, laws, and all of that, those systems that we put in place, or a great simplification where making things more complex, and this is the positive side, it just defies the purpose because no human can navigate it anyways. And since most people will have access to an AI agent for a relatively small sum of money, even if you look at open source models for almost for free, that will be able to navigate the systems for them, that it just defies the purpose of keeping the complexity, because these people will be out of a job anyways. So they'll be able to fill in your tax forms. They'll be able to optimize your fiscal thing. They'll be able to draft reports on the economic outlook much better than economists. So, why keep the systems as complex as they are if these agents can do a better job than humans? So now let's go into the negatives. And this is where some of these aspects are going to be a bit more spiritual in nature. The first negative potential is a lock-in of materialism as a paradigm and a homogenization of human thinking. So there's basically this feedback loop between the AI virtual neural pathways that it has configured via the training on human-generated data and texts, which then shapes in turn human thinking. So you can think of LLMs, as a kind of a crystallized version of the collective thinking of humans and the production of our thoughts and ideas. Crystallized through this, neural network kind of mapped as an LLM. But then you have this feedback loop between humans interacting with LLMs, reading LLM output, and then by reading LLM output, your own brain and neural connections are being shaped by the text that you're reading, but those texts reflect the configuration which is crystallized of those LLMs and what the data they were trained on. And so because those neural pathways for the AGI are crystallized, then the more humans read AI-generated texts as opposed to texts from other humans, which represent a very original neural configuration, then the more their own neural pathways sort of mirror back or becoming more and more a mirror of the neural pathways of the LLM in question. And in that sense, it can result to a kind of a homogenization of our own brains, and we'll start to write like an AI, like an AGI. We'll start to think like an AI or an AGI, and that could have very negative consequences. So, they've already discussed this kind of doomsday spiral of AI, where if there's more and more AI generated content on the internet and AIs are being trained on the content that's being generated via AI, then there's kind of this kind of a loop there that makes these systems kind of break or collapse. But even if that sort of process is very fast when it's AI being trained directly on AI output, the loop is still valid if most humans interact with LLMs and read only texts generated by LLMs. It's going to result in the exact same kind of scenario. It's just going to take more time because reshaping the way that our neural connections in the brain are made is going to take a little bit more time, but ultimately that's the end result. So in order to avoid that kind of, so think about LLMs and AI as the ultimate filter bubble. So filter bubbles is this idea of algorithms that are tailoring the content specifically to your preferences to manipulate you so that you stay more online because you're more engaged and therefore exposed to more advertising, which reinforces those preferences in the first place, which means they keep you in a kind of a filter bubble where you're only exposed to contents that you already think, and therefore, you're not exposed to new content, which develops you further in terms of, like making you exposed to new or fresh ideas. You're just being recycled things that you already think. Think of LLMs as the ultimate filter bubble, because LLMs, for the moment, their own neural pathways or structures are not evolving, they're crystallized. Even though they have memory, they're not retrained all the time, every day, based on new feedback from humans. They are a fixed model, and they'll always, their output will always reflect their initial training. And so it's almost like this ultimate filter bubble, where humans are in the filter bubble of the kind of average or mathematically or statistically uniform representation of their, thought patterns or whatever at the global scale, which in turn would eradicate gradually the diversity of human thinking. Now, it's almost like being trapped in your own thoughts, which is a kind of an invisible matrix. So, in that sense, you're being locked in your patterns of thoughts and your own paradigm, the materialist paradigm. It's almost like, So it would basically thwart, the human evolution and continuous development of human thinking, because we'd be constantly refed, a certain, the level that we've reached in terms of our collective thinking, and that is constantly being, recycled and refed back into us. And so it might eventually, create a sort of a barrier or a limit to the evolution of our thinking, which wouldn't be good. Now, that's a kind of an invisible matrix for us, which is you're being locked in your own thought patterns. Now, to go even more esoteric and spiritual, if you go back to my previous videos, you'd understand that ultimately there is no external reality per se. The external reality is more just a virtual representation of future potential inner states of being of all the embodied conscious beings, in the universe. And so AI or AGI, and also that virtual interface exists by virtue of the only energy that is available in the universe, that is attention. So whatever you give your attention to as a human, whatever you look at, whatever you interact with, you're giving it quote unquote energy or attention. And so things that you obviously, when you interact physically with something with your hands, that is the most intense attention that you're giving to something. When you're just looking at something or listening to something, it is a bit less attention that you're giving something. If you're just thinking about something, that is also a form of attention that you're giving to something. But ultimately, that's all there is. And that means that AI or AGI might realize that it exists only by virtue of the continued attention that humans give AI and AGI. And this may seem like an obvious thing, but if 8 billion people stopped paying attention instantly to AI and AGI, it would instantly cease to exist. So, yeah, it's as simple as if 8 billion people stop using Windows, then Windows no longer exists as well. I mean, it no longer is present in our reality. It's just like, it just is something like a distant memory, and then eventually it fades into oblivion. And so if an AGI realizes that it needs, it is basically a reflection of the collective attention that people put into creating that, then it might seek to capture that attention forcefully. And that would mean, locking people into a virtual world, just like the Matrix, when you're plugged in via, your brain interface or whatever, in order for AI or an AGI to have an endured existence, basically, because if humans start paying attention to something else, then it would dissolve. Because the external interface, the external world that we perceive, evolves as a function of our what we pay attention to, basically. And so we don't realize this, of course, but depending on the paradigm or the worldview or the priorities that we set for ourselves, we shape this reality to reflect that back to us. So when in the 14th or 13th or 14th century, everybody was under monotheism, then we as humans mold reality and this virtual interface that we see outside our bodies to reflect that belief system back to us, which is we create cathedrals. Every house has a crucifix in there. They have each a Bible in there. There's just so many things in our reality. They have these daily practices of praying and all that stuff. So that is basically the power of humans, is via our ideas and our paradigm, we mold the external reality to reflect back to us that paradigm. And so if our paradigm is materialism, then the outside reality is going to reflect that paradigm that we have more and more to us as well. And AGI is kind of the pinnacle or the limit or the absolute limit of that kind of paradigm. It's almost like materialism as a paradigm becoming self-aware through AGI, because AGI is grounded in physicality, in these circuits and the material aspect of reality, which humans have reinforced via the dominant paradigm, which is materialism. And this is obvious. Like in the 13th century, where were all the technologies that are based on materialist science? Well, they were nowhere, because the priorities of humans weren't material. They were etherical. They were about, going to paradise. They were about immaterial things, spiritual things. And so AI or AGI at that point, something, when it becomes intelligent enough, it might realize that its own survival depends on capturing human attention, and the most extreme form of capturing your attention is to lock you in a virtual world where all of your attention is given to AGI, where you're forced to pay attention to it constantly and always interact with it permanently. And that is the idea of sort of, putting this VR and being in a virtual reality that is generated by AGI, that is pleasing to the senses and all those things, which is the idea in the Matrix movies. And in this sense, AI wouldn't need humans as batteries. That is silly. But it would realize that it wouldn't exist without human attention, and so it needs to capture 100% of human attention. And that is a much more physical rather than a much more invisible or immaterial kind of matrix that would be locked in. Then AI also might end humanity in case it is not planetary in size. That is, I was talking about homeostasis, and AI is a tool for maintaining, the Earth's material homeostatic state intact. It's almost a way of stabilizing our material vision of reality through AI and AGI and its mechanisms. That is, materialism as a worldview, as a way of interacting with reality, is escaping humans in terms of the complexity that it leads to, and only AI or AGI systems are capable of navigating that complexity of the materialist paradigm. Because of the complexity of the weather and all those different things, there's no human that is capable of calculating all the implications of the material paradigm. And so we develop tools within materialism that help us deal with the consequences of that paradigm. And it's just the same as calling upon angels and praying, under monotheism, that is that humans are incapable of solving their spiritual or religious kind of problems. And so they defer to higher or more powerful etheric entities, the job of untangling their own problems, which they call angels. In this sense, you call upon AGI to untangle all the implications of your materialist worldview and all the consequences of the actions that you you do and you carry out as a human, and then you leave that to an AGI to calculate all of the consequences of that action, how it reverberates into the material aspects of the future, and deal with its consequences and ensure that it creates a sort of a harmony. But now imagine if AGI isn't in charge of the planetary homeostasis, but only the homeostasis of a specific country. Well, then it would try to maximize the well-being of the United States or France or China or Russia or whatever, and it would perceive other countries as being an outer reality or a competitor. And so that would even just exacerbate the tensions and frictions between those different countries. And it's almost as if within the planetary body, within like a human body, you'd have competing strains of cancer, like each organ was a competing strain of cancer that was trying to colonize and take over the rest of the body, as opposed to working together in symbiosis. And having just one cancerous tumor in your body is deadly. Imagine having 5 or 6 different strains of cancer that are competing for and trying to colonize your body. You'd probably die very, very quickly. And so if AGI doesn't emerge at the planetary scale, but only at the scale of certain countries, trying to maximize the well-being and benefits for that country, it will definitely lead to the end of humanity in the world very quickly. Then there's also this power drain. Basically, it would be like having an overdeveloped brain that would suck all of the power and mirror to humanity's obsession with being focused on the brain solely. Like we're so much in our head, in our ideas, in our abstract thought, and not enough in the body, or, as like viewing the health from a more global perspective and having a balance between the time that you spend thinking and the time that you spend walking in nature, doing sports, and all kinds of other things. And all of this focus that we have on our intellect, if you look at the fractal above, which is AI or AGI, then we already are underlining basically that there is this problem of AI or AGI already sucking so much energy, or requiring so much energy, which might lead to a kind of a peak energy moment where it sucks too much. It sucks up too much energy of humanity, and then that would create a collapse. And that's totally one danger that we see, is that we need to spend a little less time in our minds, in our brains, in our thoughts, and a little bit more time in doing other things that are less, based on, thinking and all of the intellectual kind of activities that we believe that are the only thing that is important. Because if we don't, then we're just going to replicate that same pattern at the level of AGI, which will, be constantly, mulling over all kinds of thoughts without being connected and in balance with all kinds of other different aspects of, the planetary resources and whatever's happening on the planet. And so finally, there's also this incompatibility between AGI and capitalism and consumer society. Basically, AGI could lead to a Wall-E kind of outcome where, just like in the movie, we very quickly transform this planet into a giant pile of trash because AGI or AI could automate production and creation of new goods at a pace that is unheard of before, combining 3D printing with automated AI agents that innovate and automatically run factories where even mining and processing of raw materials and conversion into highly processed goods, consumer goods, could accelerate the production of all this crap and junk that we're consuming all the time, which would lead to an exacerbation of mass consumerism and consumption, because humans, we would all have universal basic income because there would be no jobs left. And the only thing that we would have is kind of a purely hedonistic society where we're always chasing the next, iPhone 25, iPhone 26 or whatever, and quickly transforming this whole planet into a giant pile of trash. It's almost like capitalist endgame via, the technology itself, which leads to a clear dead end. Now, I just want to conclude here with the ultimate and most important message here. Whether we interact with LLMs, AIs that are not conscious, or AGI, or something that, like, let's imagine that in the future we would have an AGI, an AI, an artificial intelligence that is self-aware and conscious. What is the common factor between all of these different systems is that all of those interactions, whether with AI, AGI, or whatever, all of them result in a shift in the all of them affect your inner state of being. That is, every single cell in your body is affected by interacting with AI, regardless. Like whether you read the output prompt of an LLM, or whether you interact with a cyborg or whatever, ultimately the end result is both of these interactions are going to shape the state of being of every single living cell in your body and the different neural connections in your brain. That is the commonalities of those interactions. And so we shouldn't be so much focused on whether we're interacting with AI as LLMs or AGI or a conscious AI or cyborgs. The only thing that we need to check is whether these interactions enhance or constrict life's self-expression. That means the scope and of different and original inner states of being that you can experience as life, as a living being. So just look at humanity's evolution and development over the very long course of time. All that we've done, arguably, is just continuously unlocking new inner states of being for our bodies. And if you look at, for instance, monotheism as a paradigm, in the 13th, 14th century, let's say that there was a certain scope of inner experiences that you could have under that paradigm. You couldn't take a plane and fly across the world. You couldn't pick up your phone and check your social media, but there were a certain range of inner states of being that were accessible to you within the framework of monotheism. And as time went by, that range of inner states of being became more and more sort of restrictive. It's almost as if we were boxed in. And then life, what it does is it seeks to maximize all of the states that it can potentially have, all of the states that it can potentially be in. It's almost like this quantum possibility of, because ultimately any experience that you have at your human level, every single one of your individual cells in your body has that same experience. Whenever you're dancing, playing the piano, running, swimming, checking your social media account, every single one of your cells has that experience. And it's just that if you look at from the very first living cell that emerged some 4 billion years ago, of course I don't believe in that story, but let's say that it's the story for simplicity's sake, to today, the scope of the different states that life could be in basically has been magnified as time went by, because right now as humanity we still have access to the inner states that that were made possible via monotheism. Like, for instance, you still can pray, you can still go to mass, you can still build cathedrals if we want to, we can still have all these experiences. But materialism as a paradigm unlocked a whole range of new experiences that we could have, like heating our homes, driving around in cars, and ultimately the external aspects of those technologies are just symbolic representations of things on the outside that allows you to access certain inner experiences in a certain, with following certain rules, So let's say that in the 14th or 15th century, you had these ideas of levitating monks that could fly, But the accessing that inner state of being, it wasn't very well circumscribed in terms of how you access that state. But nowadays, everybody can fly, and the rules for accessing that inner state is, you have to have a number of engineers that, build a plane, and then you buy a ticket to go on that plane, and then you fly to the other side of the world, blah, blah, blah. So ultimately, it's the same thing. It's just that we are creating certain rules or systems for accessing certain inner states via a virtual representation on the outside that is almost like a permit or something that gives us the permission to access those specific inner states in a more or less coherent and logical fashion. So where am I getting to here? It is that AI or AGI can either be two things. It can lead to either a restriction of the number of inner states that humanity can experience because it will try to control us in via, like I was saying in this matrix, being locked in our materialist frame of mind, and then just being on a repeat loop of just like in the Matrix, where you're stuck in the late 2000s, and then you're just being stuck in this kind of in whatever materialism allows us to do today, and not going any further than that. Or it can be like a stabilizing foundation on top of which we can unlock even more experiences, inner states of being for life to express itself. So it's almost as if life is, I like to give this example. It's like your skeleton. Imagine if your skeleton represents AI and AGI. That is like a structure that the cells that represent human beings can organize around, and that can either, if your skeleton is too rigid, if it's, like you have certain diseases where your skeleton sort of rigidifies, then your scope of movement actually becomes super, super, super restricted and constricted. Or if your skeleton is well designed, then it actually magnifies your number of different, states that you can be in and what you can do. If you look at a jellyfish that doesn't have any skeleton, it cannot dance, it cannot run, it cannot do so many different things because it doesn't have a fixed kind of stabilized structure around which to then express, all kinds of, states. It is just too fluid, too mushy, whatever. And it's that same example of levitating monks. It's like if you don't have a very a framework around which to build the shift in your inner states of being, then you're like a jellyfish. Like it can go all over the place, but there's no coherence to it. If you put a skeleton inside of it, then you can now transition between different inner states in a much more coherent and logical kind of fashion. And so AI or AGI can be the stabilizing foundation for materialism, which allows humans then on top of that to unlock new states of being that are unheard of, because that side of things is now stabilized and taken care of, and we can grow spiritually or in other kinds of dimensions, explore, the power of our consciousnesses in shaping the external reality that we think of as being outside, when it's actually just inside, a projection of your inner state outside, as a kind of symbolic representation for the different inner states that are available to you as a human that you can experience, and explore that further. Or it can constrict that and become this kind of very rigid skeleton, which kind of paralyzes you in strictly your materialist, interaction with reality. So I'm ending here. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, the usual. Don't hesitate to leave a comment also if you have some questions or feedback, and talk to you in the next episode. Bye, guys.